Frank Fritz's story isn't just about collecting dusty relics or chatting up random folks in backcountry barns. It's about a man who dared to see value in the things everyone else threw away, and about the battles he faced when the cameras turned off. His life was a swirl of high-stakes friendships, personal struggles, and shocking twists that no one could have predicted. How could someone so full of energy and curiosity end up on such a tragic path? And why did his longtime friend Mike Wolfe finally decide to break his silence? By the end of this, you'll know all the secrets, the heartbreaks, and the shocking truths that shaped Frank's last days. But before we get there, let's take it back to where it all started. A tiny kid with a wide-eyed fascination for old things that others called junk. Some say you can spot a legend early on, while others say it's all just chance. In Frank's case, it was a little of both. Frank Fritz was born on October 11th, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa, a small city with deep American roots and a quiet Midwestern charm. As a child, he wasn't obsessed with sports, video games, or the usual kid stuff. Instead, he spent hours picking through flea markets and yard sales, determined to uncover anything that hinted at a history beyond his own. Coins, old magazines, stamps. If it had a backstory or a hint of mystery, Frank wanted it in his growing collection. Imagine a young boy trailing behind his parents at an antique shop, wide-eyed, examining every corner like he was on a treasure hunt. Where others saw dusty shelves, Frank saw living artifacts. He'd ask questions, try to learn the story behind each item, and dream about uncovering lost fortunes in someone's cluttered attic. This boundless curiosity defined him early on. Even as his classmates teased him for his boring interests, Frank brushed it off, guided by the quiet thrill of discovery. But here's the twist that sets him apart from most other enthusiastic kids. As he grew older, his fascination never died. It only broadened. He began picking up bigger items, vintage signs, old bikes, and quirky memorabilia. It was a passion with no off switch. Somehow, that spark led him down a path that would eventually earn him a spot on one of TV's most watched shows about American treasures. For nearly 25 years, Frank Fritz walked a very different road than most would expect from a future reality TV star. After high school, he didn't jump headlong into the antiques business, nor did he set off on a cross-country picking spree. Instead, he worked as a fire inspector in Iowa. It was a stable, respectable job that offered a solid paycheck and a regular routine. Yet, even while inspecting old warehouses and fire stations, Frank never lost the urge to hunt for hidden gems. Old helmets, antique fire alarms, vintage extinguishers. He began collecting them as if they were rare artifacts from forgotten worlds. It was a strange juxtaposition. The fire inspector by day, the relentless treasure seeker by night, or whenever he could spare an off day. Some people might have told him to be practical, to settle into the normal rhythms of adult life. But Frank wasn't wired that way. Every building he stepped into felt like a potential goldmine of stories and artifacts. Deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore his calling forever. Over time, his collection grew so large that he decided to quit his job and open his own shop, Frank's Finds. It was a leap into uncharted territory, but for a man whose soul was lit up by the thrill of discovery, it was the only direction that made sense. Turning a personal obsession into a nationally televised phenomenon isn't something that happens overnight. Enter Mike Wolfe, a man with a knack for seeing big possibilities in small places. Mike, born just over a year after Frank, also hailed from the Midwest. He too had a taste for collecting and a passion for the dusty corners of America that most folks ignore. But Mike had something else, a vision. He wanted to create a TV show about picking, the art of finding value in places where others saw none. Frank was skeptical at first. The idea of being followed by cameras, having every deal or negotiation documented, and playing a role on a reality TV show didn't come naturally to him. He was content to run his shop, chat with fellow collectors, and live life at a laid-back pace. But Mike was persistent. He believed people would be fascinated by a show that combined travel, history, quirky personalities, and the thrill of a great bargain. After countless rejections from different networks, the History Channel finally bit in 2010, and American Pickers was born. When the show aired, fans immediately fell in love with the concept. Week after week, they tuned in to see Frank and Mike rummaging through barns, junkyards, and back roads of the United States, finding rusty gold where no one else would even bother looking. The heart of the show was the brotherly bond between the two men. Mike was the big dreamer and lead negotiator, always ready to sweet-talk a reluctant seller. Frank was more easygoing, often cracking jokes and showing genuine curiosity about an old sign or a half-buried motorcycle. The chemistry was real, the interactions authentic, and the public ate it up. For the first time, the antique world had bona fide rock stars. And while Mike was the visionary, Frank became the show's emotional core. He was the friendly face who could turn even a tense negotiation into a light-hearted conversation. But like all seemingly perfect success stories, cracks began to form behind the scenes. Sometimes, the biggest challenges hide in plain sight, masked by the bright lights of fame. For years, Frank and Mike traversed the country together, making people laugh at their banter, shaking hands with collectors, and building a massive fan base. But in 2020, viewers began noticing something off. Frank was missing from new episodes. Initially, the official word was that Frank was taking time off for health reasons. He had major back surgery, which included 185 stitches and 2 rods in his spine. It was no small procedure, and fans understood that recovery wouldn't be quick. However, the silence from the production team and Mike Wolfe himself led to speculation. Had Frank decided to quit? Had the network fired him? Was there a deeper rift? Questions buzzed on social media, and as the months dragged on, curiosity turned into concern. Everyone wanted to know, where in the world was Frank Fritz? In July 2021, the news finally broke. Frank was permanently out. Mike released a statement wishing Frank the best, sounding cordial enough. Yet, when Frank spoke up, he offered a much darker perspective. According to Frank, Mike had never called him once during his back surgery or recovery. After a decade-long partnership that made them both household names, it appeared that their friendship might have been more fragile than anyone realized. Frank felt betrayed. He claimed that Mike wanted him gone long before his official exit. Fans were left reeling. How could two people who started out so close end up so distant? Social media erupted with debates. Some blamed Mike for abandoning Frank, while others pointed to Frank's alleged personal issues, suggesting that his struggles might have pushed a wedge between him and his longtime friend. The true extent of this fallout was becoming clearer, and it wasn't pretty. When a person is in the public eye, it's easy to assume you know them. They appear on your TV every week. They crack jokes and smile, and you feel like you're sharing that adventure. But Frank Fritz's real life was often hidden behind the curtains of production. The weight of health issues, the sting of personal mistakes, and the relentless pressure of fame all collided at once. Frank had been wrestling with Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive tract. It's unpredictable, can be incredibly painful, and has no definitive cure. Over the years, Frank lost around 65 pounds, partly due to the disease, and partly due to lifestyle changes. While fans might have noticed his fluctuating weight, few understood the true toll it took on his day-to-day life. Crohn's flare-ups can leave a person physically drained, anxious, and constantly on edge about the next wave of pain. Then there was his battle with substance issues. In 2017, Frank was arrested for driving the wrong way on an interstate while under the influence of alcohol and Xanax. He openly admitted that alcohol had become a problem, something he relied on to cope with anxiety. His family had a history of addiction, and he realized he was on a dangerous path. To fight it, he checked himself into rehab for 77 days, an unusually long stay that signaled he was committed to change. It seemed that despite the bright smiles and cheerful demeanor on camera, Frank was juggling more than most people could handle. Leaving American pickers might have been a blessing in disguise, giving him time to heal and recalibrate. But life wasn't through testing him yet, and the gravest ordeal was just around the corner. Love can be the greatest treasure of all, or it can be the heaviest chain around your neck. For Frank, his most intense relationship was with Diane Bankson, a woman he first met when he was just 25. Their bond lasted on and off for decades, filled with enough drama and passion to fuel 1,000 tabloid headlines. In 2017, he finally popped the question, setting up a romantic future in a beautiful home in Iowa. He was ready to settle down, and from the outside, it looked like a perfect happily ever after. But in 2018, everything came crashing down. Diane claimed she caught Frank with another woman in their farmhouse, leading her to call off the engagement. Frank, for his part, insisted it was Diane who had been unfaithful, seeing another man in secret for over 2 years. The accusations flew on both sides, each one painting the other as the villain. Frank got a tattoo reading, "Once a cheater, always a cheater," as a permanent testament to his heartbreak. The turmoil didn't stop there. Diane sued Frank in 2020, alleging negligence involving fireworks that caused her severe burns. She claimed he carelessly disposed of them, leading to an explosion. She also said Frank refused to take her to the hospital, telling her to toughen up. The case was later dismissed, but the damage was already done. By the end of their saga, Frank sold the home they once shared. Diane moved on and announced she'd fallen in love again. They never reconciled or spoke publicly in a positive light about each other afterward. Some say that heartbreak can drive a person to the darkest corners of their mind. If that's true, Frank had been dwelling in those corners for a long time. In July 2022, fans were jolted by grim news. Frank Fritz had suffered a massive stroke and was found unresponsive in his home. He was rushed to the hospital, and for a time, the prognosis looked bleak. A stroke isn't just a medical emergency. It can rob you of speech, mobility, even your personality. For someone already battling health issues, this was a devastating blow. Frank's rehabilitation process was long and grueling. He needed a guardian appointed by the court to oversee his daily affairs, and a bank took control of his finances. The man who once roamed freely across America, searching for hidden valuables, now struggled to perform basic tasks. His medical expenses soared to nearly $30,000 a month, underscoring just how dire his situation had become. Yet, in the midst of this crisis, an old friend stepped back into Frank's life, Mike Wolfe. Whatever distance or anger existed between them seemed to vanish when faced with the possibility of losing a person who had once been like a brother. Mike visited Frank in the hospital, checked on his progress, and reconnected with the man he had traveled thousands of miles with. They laughed about old memories, recalled the random junkyards they'd scoured together, and slowly let go of the bitterness. It was a small light in a very dark chapter. Time has a way of bringing clarity, and as Frank's condition worsened, it seemed the rift between him and Mike finally healed. The cameras that once followed them everywhere had faded into the background. No more negotiations, no more brand deals, just two people who knew each other better than almost anyone else in the world. Then came a shocking revelation. According to Mike, Frank's biggest mistake wasn't his health missteps, nor was it the public spat they endured. It was his decision to let go of Diane Bankson without truly fighting for their relationship. Mike was quoted as saying something along the lines of, "He killed her the moment he sold that house." Not meaning literal harm, but emphasizing how Frank had severed any chance of salvaging a life with the one woman who might have stood by him through thick and thin. To Mike, if Frank had addressed the issues with Diane head-on, owned up to any wrongdoing, and tried to patch things up, perhaps his story would have played out differently. Perhaps the final chapter wouldn't have been filled with hospital rooms, legal guardians, and the sorrow of dying mostly alone. The statement was jarring, but it carried an emotional weight. Regret. It was as if Mike was warning others that sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't against disease or public opinion, but against our own pride and regrets. By September 2024, Frank's health had taken a turn for the worse. Cerebral infarction complications from his earlier stroke and worsening heart issues like aortic stenosis left him in a fragile state. Doctors did what they could, but each day was a struggle. Eventually, it became clear there was no road back. Frank Fritz was nearing the end of a life that had seen more ups and downs than most people could fathom. In his final days, Frank was surrounded by a small circle of loved ones: his mother, a close friend, and Mike Wolfe. The man who had once traveled coast to coast in search of rusty gold now lay in a quiet room. No cameras, no autographs, no network executives, just a handful of people who truly cared about him, waiting and praying. Mike later recounted how he sat beside Frank, holding his hand and whispering words of forgiveness and friendship. Old grudges melted away in that solemn moment. After years of tension, heartbreak, and misunderstandings, they were simply two old friends, united by memories that no fight could erase. When Frank finally slipped away, he left behind a paradoxical legacy. A beloved television personality, known for his warm spirit, and a man who had wrestled with demons that sometimes got the better of him. News of Frank's passing sent ripples through the American Pickers fan community. People posted tributes, shared their favorite moments from the show, and expressed shock that the man who once seemed so lively was gone. But the real story of Frank Fritz was more than just the comedic banter or successful treasure hunts. It was a story of a Midwestern kid who had a passion for uncovering forgotten history, a man who had fallen deeply in love and suffered even deeper heartbreak, and a friend who lost his way but found redemption in his final days. There's a haunting question that lingers. Could things have been different if Frank had made different choices? If he had faced his health issues sooner? If he had fought harder for love? If he and Mike had reconciled in time to work together again, would the ending be less tragic? We'll never know for sure. Frank's journey serves as a reminder that life is fragile, and sometimes the battles we fight within ourselves are the hardest to win. Yet, for all the controversies and shattered relationships, Frank still left a mark on millions of viewers who saw in him a reflection of their own curiosity and passion. His segments on American Pickers reminded us that history is living all around us, waiting to be found in the most unlikely places. He made it okay to be excited about old signs, vintage bikes, and dusty boxes in the corner of an attic. In the end, maybe that's the treasure he left behind. A sense of wonder and the courage to chase what fascinates us, no matter how small it may seem to others. Frank Fritz wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, hurt people, and faced challenges that often overwhelmed him. But he also spread joy, shared stories, and inspired legions of fans to see value in overlooked corners of the world. His life was a testament to the idea that even a seemingly simple passion, like antique picking, can lead to extraordinary experiences. Mike Wolfe's parting words about Frank's greatest mistake highlight a universal truth. Sometimes we push away the very things that could save us. Sometimes our pride, fear, or pain leads us to turn our backs on the people who matter most. It's a cautionary tale for anyone reading or listening. Hold on to the ones who care about you. Fight for the relationships that anchor your life, and don't let regrets pile up until it's too late. So, what do you think? Is there such a thing as a second chance in love, in friendship, in life? Could Frank have paved a different path if he'd just taken a step back and seen what truly mattered? Share your thoughts down below. Because sometimes the most compelling stories aren't about the antiques we collect, but the regrets and triumphs we gather along the way. If you enjoyed this story or learned something new, hit that subscribe button and let us know your favorite Frank Fritz moment. We've got countless more stories to uncover, and your curiosity keeps us going. Until next time, keep your eyes open for hidden treasures. They're often right in front of you.